My name is Adam, and welcome to the Lead Realm. Thank you for joining me on my journey to paint the models of my youth. This channel is both a diary of my progress and also my way of documenting my painting process. Towards the end of 2025, I took a trip to Warhammer World here in the UK, and in the historical cabinet of the museum, they had an amazing selection of Oldhammer Undead. The variety of warm colours and classic sculpts invoking that hammer horror aesthetic that was so prominent in the early editions got me thinking. Last year, a friend of mine asked if I would like to take part in a Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition scenario, The Revenge of the Doomlord. A scenario found in the 4th edition Undead Army book that pits the stalwart ranks of the Empire against the unrelenting tide of horrors that is the undead. Luckily, I had most of the models required already in my backlog, only having to pick up a couple of chariots to complete the list. Here is what the undead side of that scenario looks like. A lot of bone and rotting flesh, being led by Dieter Helschnicht. Now, let's take a closer look at the units that are going to make up this project. Firstly, we have 20 ghouls, a tough unit of living models that are a rarity in the undead army list, as they are not immune to psychology, and thus are able to utilise certain tactics not open to the rest of the list. These models are the 5th edition metal sculpts with a couple of older ones mixed in. Next, we have 2 skeleton chariots, the quick-moving, hard-hitting but fragile flankers of the list. These are the older metal versions that were originally part of the Skeleton War Machines box set from the late 80s, alongside the Screaming Skull catapult. Here are the heroes of the list, 2 wights on foot and 2 more mounted, one of which is carrying the battle standard. The foot wights are the 5th edition classics, with the mounted ones being a slightly later release, I believe. A bog standard unit of 20 skeleton warriors, with the metal upgrades available from the later box set release. There are also a few of the older skeleton horde models that have been mixed in for some size variety. 10 skeleton horsemen, which in the scenario are split into 2 units of 5, each led by one of the mounted wights. These have been upgraded with the plastic armour pieces found in the original box set. 2 carrion, which make up the air support, whose primary purpose is normally to hunt war machines and lone characters. Here are the counterparts to the previously shown chariots, the Screaming Skull catapults, used to sow panic and chip units at long range. I have created some large bases for these models, with holes for the crew in order to try and have some small diorama effects. This is an interesting unit. To my knowledge, there wasn't ever any official unit created that had skeletons armed with crossbows, but they feature in this list, so I 3D printed some crossbows to equip them appropriately. The Gary Morley metal zombies of this edition are some of my favourite models. Dripping with classic style, I can't wait to paint these and bring a little variety and colour to the army. Finally, we have the cause of the Empire's woes, Dieter Helschnicht. Riding his manticore, he is both a formidable magical presence as well as a capable close combat threat. Today, we are starting the journey to get this force painted, starting with the core unit of skeletons. As mentioned, This is a mix of the original 1986 Skeleton Horde models and the later, slightly larger mid-90s versions. Despite the difference in sculpts, I think mixing these two eras works quite well together and gives a bit of variation to the size within the unit. I started by giving them a light undercoat of Wraithbone spray, touched up with Screaming Skull where the spray didn't quite cover fully. This was followed by an application of Skeleton Horde contrast paint all over the bone. On roughly the bottom half of the model, I used the darker Garagax Sewer contrast and then blended the two together. This is to bring the attention to the top half of the model, and also to give the effect that these skeletons have been drudging through mud, or perhaps have been freshly raised from their eternal slumber. Next, a fairly heavy dry brush of Screaming Skull goes over the top half of the models, trying to keep the brush at a 90-degree angle to the detail, so the paint is caught on the top edges only. I do this a couple of times over each area just to ensure good coverage. I then go back with the brush and put down some more controlled highlights, again with Screaming Skull. These are put anywhere there are large, smooth areas, especially if they are facing upwards. Our final highlight step for the bone is to use some pure white on the very edges and upward facing areas to push the brightness just a bit more. Here we are with the bone completed. A relatively clean looking style, but with a bit of grime and shadow created by the darker bottom half. For the weapons, I'm going for a semi-non-metallic metal style. Mostly because I wanted to try and tone down the brightness of the weapons, and thought true metallic metal might distract a little bit. I start by basing the weapons and other metal areas with Mournfang Brown. I'm certainly no expert when it comes to painting, and definitely not when it comes to non-metallic metal, so I'm pretty much winging it on each model. I mix Kislev flesh in with the Mournfang brown in increasingly large amounts, trying to put highlights where I think the light would catch the angles of the metals. Eventually, I add some very fine, final highlights, mixing white into the Kislev flesh, focusing on the very tips and edges of the metal. To finish the weapons and metal, I add a watered down wash of jade green onto the darkest areas and recesses, feathering it out on the large surfaces and letting it pool in the recesses. Now, to get my head down and do it 19 more times. Once this is dry, here's how we look. The only other things that these models have left to paint now are the areas of wood and leather, both of which I start by laying down a layer of Doomlord brown. Which is then washed with the ever-faithful Nuln oil. Once the wash is dry, I go back in to highlight with a mix of Doomlord brown and Screaming Skull. I want these areas to be warm, but not to get lost against all of the other browns on the models. Next, we're on to basing. I'm going for the classic PVA glue and sand combo to keep things simple for this army. I will likely add some details and interest onto the larger bases, but for the basic units, this is the plan. Taking an old brush, I cover the bases with PVA glue, then dip the models into my tub of sand, which, if you're interested, is simply sharp sand from a builder's merchant, dried out in the oven, with the larger pieces sieved out. A 10kg bag cost me a few pounds and will last longer than I will. I run my finger around the base of the model to remove any overspill before setting them to the side to dry. Once the bases are dry, I give them a coat of Skaven Blight Dinge, slightly watered down to help the paint flow. This is then followed by more Nuln oil to add depth, before a dry brush of Skaven Blight Dinge mixed with Rakarth flesh, focusing on the outside edges, leaving the centre of the base darker to introduce the idea of shadow under the model. As always, the final step is to paint the base rims black. Some may complain that my basing style, and more generally my painting style, isn't in line with the era of models that I paint, but I'm a very strong believer of painting your models how you choose. Even back in the 90s, I didn't paint my bases goblin green, and I can't quite bring myself to do it now, despite seeing so many fantastic era-appropriate paint jobs with it. I've selected two different grass tufts for this army, the first of which is a black, dry, burnt type, which I thought would draw light into the base and hopefully help focus on the lighter top parts of the model. The other is a greeny blue turquoise style, which I thought matched the verdigris on the weapons quite well. As usual, these are taken from their backing with a little dab of superglue and then placed on the bases in a random arrangement. A quick blast of ultra matte varnish keeps them protected during gameplay, and we're done. And here we are, a completed unit of skeleton warriors, the first unit in this Revenge of the Doomlord army. This unit, and in fact a lot of this army, have been rescued from various places over the years. While I did have an undead army back in the day, sadly these are not my original models. However, I have picked them up slowly over the years from online sales and trades, and now have more than enough to put together a large force. Many of these models came to me damaged, or were damaged in the stripping and restoration phase. But rather than discard them, I instead chose to give them a new life, either with conversions, or, like you can see here, by trying to tell a bit of a story with them. Seeing them raise from the dead at the back of the unit feels to me like a good way to keep using these fantastic, if a little broken, models. Next on my list for this army is going to be a couple of Screaming Skull catapults. I imagine that these won't take too long to paint, so why not stick around if you fancy seeing this army take shape. However, for now, let's put this unit away in the cabinet to patiently await their friends. Thank you for joining me in this video. I hope you've enjoyed watching me paint these bony boys. Have you played this scenario before? If so, how did it go? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Stay old school, and long live the lead.